Dear participants of the conference, we are asking you to come to the room to take your seats. We give the stage to the moderator, Alexander Antonov. Good day, dear friends. We have a section with quite a broad title, which we're going to discuss quite a broad range of things. Infrastructure of modern life, what's lacking in Russian cities or for Russian cities. And we don't have much time. I'm going to monitor the time that we spend on keynotes. We don't have enough time really for keynotes. I want to leave some time at the end of the section for questions and discussions. So my keynote will be very fast, very quick, short and brief. And our perception of cities consists of various types of myths as a result of very active discussion of urban sciences here, urban topics. There are quite a few clear trends, apparent, obvious trends, and in the cities, and there's got to be a few changes there, and then the cities will become much better straight away. And amongst the myths, for example, the point-to-point development, the high-rises, it's very bad, and the automobile is bad, and a bicycle is good, and will resolve all of our projects. The projects for the complex development of free areas will give us affordable housing, etc., etc. All these things which seem obvious and evident, or agglomeration, it's economically good, and monocentrism is worse than polycentric ideas. It's not as simple as that. The cities are more complex than they seem to us, and we're going to be looking for more complex answers to simple questions. What's lacking in and for Russian cities, and what can we do for the cities to change in positive fashion? Now, a section I want to introduce the participants. Some of them you have already met, have been introduced. This is Jerry Van Eyck, head of the company Milk. Rosalia Tarnovetskaya, the head analyst of Design Bureau Strelka. Viktor Kiselov, the Ministry for Construction and Development of Infrastructure of the Sverdlovsk Oblast. Vladimir Veniaminov, the chief architect of the Sverdlovsk Oblast. Maxim Puchkov, the vice chancellor of the Ural States Academy of Architecture. Oleg Smirnov, head of the management center for Kortos company, and Olga Ivanova, head of the workshop of the master plan of the Ekaterinburg city. And we're going to have two keynotes to start with, and then I'm going to introduce. I'm going to give you the option to. I'll ask questions, and there will be an opportunity to answer those questions. All the participants of the round table, and then that will be the kind of modus operandi that we're going to be working. And so first is Jerry Van Eyck. Please take the stage.
Knows how to switch it on, как его включить.
It's not for me because my voice is loud enough. It's just for the translators. Need to hear the microphone on too. Anyway, I cheated a little bit because I was asked by the organization to talk about the rules for the design of public space, and I don't consider myself as Moses, so I changed rules into principles, because first of all, I don't think there are rules. There are more principles that you can follow generally when you design public spaces, which is what I do professionally. Anyway, if you look at Yekaterinburg or St. Petersburg or Istanbul, Paris, New York, where I live currently, or God forbid, Dubai, you can do the math and look at statistics. 53% of the world population lives in cities, which is the majority. If we look at a city, for example, Berlin, and this is Berlin, and we look at the way it's structured, the white is the built form, the black is the unbuilt area. If we focus on the black, on the unbuilt area, we can do a quick calculation, and we learn that 46% is open space. It's public space, streets, etc. is 40%, 46%. If we add the, let's say, interiorized open spaces such as patios, gardens, terraces, etc. to that, we can come to the conclusion that 61% of a city, taking Berlin as the average city, 61% consists of open space / public space. Just, you know, indicating how important public space is. Let's you know, public spaces as a foreground and a background. Let's look at a few. Tuileries. Trafalgar.
Есть у нас микрофоны? Микрофон поменять?
Let me go back a few, okay? All right, back in business. Tuileries, Beaubourg, Trafalgar, Park Güell, Rambla, San Marco, Copa, Central. Intentionally, I'm not saying the whole word, and I'm also intentionally not telling you where those public spaces are. But I'm pretty sure that everybody in the room knows where they are and what they are called and in which city they are taking place. These public spaces, they stand for the city. Central Park stands for New York. Red Square stands for Moscow. All those public spaces have a different background, a different function, and a different history, of course. And that's how they are sort of interwoven with the history of, or with those cities. As a designer of public spaces, a landscape architect, it's very important to design public spaces that really belong to that place, that are of that place. That should be sort of directive number one, to design something which is uniquely tailored to a certain context or location. Therefore, it is my statement that public space design or urban design cannot happen following a certain formula for design. There's no formula. It's always a unique situation. You always have to sort of adapt and learn from the context where it's at. So let's look at those principles, or rather channels to follow when you design public spaces. The first one is context. And especially Russian people, soulful people, should understand that if a project is dedicated and derived from the context, you bring out a spirit, a character, an identity of the place. This is where research starts. It's a deep dive in history, and it basically can be any aspect of a city. This is all projects that my projects that I've worked on. For example, this plaza in Rotterdam is heavily dedicated to the port of the city, right? You see harbor cranes, you see the cinema and the music hall almost mimicking the presence of the ships that are just 5 minutes away. So I'm convinced that the project must be off the place. There's no clone stamping. You cannot look at other cities and replicate it in yours. There's no formula for design, and you can't shop around. The next principle, next channel to follow in the design of public spaces is perhaps the most important aspect of the analysis process, is careful listening. Really trying to understand the anecdotes, listening to stories, learning about the site, the origin, the history, the function, because people, local people always know more than you do, and it's very important to understand their sensitivities. This project in London, Jubilee Gardens, would not have been possible without listening to all the stakeholders and the public involved for multiple reasons, not just for coming up with eventually with the idea, but also to establish ownership with these people for your project. The next channel to follow is programming. With just a beautiful design, you're not there yet. This a project realized in Miami Beach. So programming is important because one, you want to attract people. Yeah? You need to give them a reason to go there and use it. And number two, programming is good because it generates revenue. And eventually the project also has to be paid for, and it has to be maintained, etc. Economic program, if carefully curated, draws people, and we actually make a very big deal in our firm, in our projects, and we work also with specialist economic analysts and advisors to tailor and to curate the right program, which could be permanent program, could be surrounding program, or temporary programming, such as events. The next one is sustainability, and immediately I want to translate that into the three sustainabilities. First of all, of course, ecologic sustainability. We're building a park currently in Las Vegas, in the United States, which plus
Possible.
2 extras.
Yeah, okay.
Which is completely self-sufficient. It doesn't use any city water. But besides the ecological sustainability is also economic sustainability. One of the powers of public space is that it works as a catalyst for adjacent development, and it is a quality amenity that creates a quality environment and draws people. Number 3 is social sustainability. It's always a place for people. Then the next channel to follow is the guiding factors, and that's where politics come in. And I've designed the waterfront of Toronto. Guiding factors could be rules, regulations, guidelines, code requirements, especially if you work at several locations, many locations around the world. It's very important to understand that. But also other limitations such as craftsmanship and the skills of the contractors and available materials, for example. And then there's the creative practice, and people often forget, because we talk a lot about design. That's, for example, today we talk and talk and talk, a lot of talking about design, but people forget about the most important aspect of the design process, because talking doesn't bring you there. And also, design is not a science. Yeah? It is also the hand of the designer, the inspiration, the interpretation that places your project in history. It's a very mysterious process, but the designers in the room know what I mean. It can be very emotional sometimes, and it's really the blood, sweat, and tears element of a project that very often we don't talk about. The execution. I believe in a very holistic approach to design. These are realized parts of that project in Las Vegas. Everything has to work together, from the overhauling concept to the finest detail. And my studio, Melk, is really trained for meticulous attention to the finest detail, and we really go crazy there, sometimes making ourselves very unpopular with the contractor. But that's where the final point comes in, which is mobilization. In order to reach the ultimate goal, which is to build it, to realize it, master planning for me is just a sort of a long, dark tunnel to achieve the final goal, which is a realization of your project. You have to mobilize everybody, which basically means cultivating enthusiasm with everybody, establishing a belief. And the way to do that is to orchestrate as a designer, to orchestrate the process, the result of which is that people feel it's their project, so that they have ownership of it. Clients, politicians, contractors, the general public, and the designer in the role of a steward, so it's stewardship as one of the most important elements of your design process. And it means a lot of talking and laughing and crying and beer drinking, but you know, vodka will also work. And that's in a nutshell, according to my experience, what the principles are for the design of successful public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I will ask a question in Russian. Jerry? Yeah. Jerry, один короткий вопрос.
Jerry wants a short question.
Oh, it's better in Russian. Короткий вопрос сегодня.
Just a short question today. Well, thank you very much for the introduction of your approaches to designing public spaces. And what do you think today, when more and more people live in the internet and they just exist online all the time, does the role of public areas change? Would they have to compete with the virtual space of the internet, and what can be done, and how can we react to that for the designers, what the designers could do about it?
Is that the virtual space doesn't rule out the physical space. I think they can coexist. It's not, you know, what I've learned is that people don't necessarily stay at home. In fact, I think that virtual space, such as the use of computer and social media, more and more happens in and around the city. It's not a very closed activity anymore. So there's a lot of public spaces and also retail establishment where you can bring your notebook or your iPhone, and it's very portable. So what is interesting is that the role of a public space designer, a physical public space designer, can also start to incorporate those type of activities.
Thank you very much. Спасибо. И я хотел...
Thank you very much, and I want to give the stage to the next keynote speaker, Розалия Терновецкая, the chief analyst of Strelka, and she's going to tell us about schools in the future. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk here. And in our consulting bureau, we had a project, and we surveyed the modern trends of the development of school construction in the world, and I wanted to share with you the results of our study. So, in the 60s, in the 70s, the world trend was turning school, which was the plan not producing citizen. So it was built around, this is one room, one function, and where the functional properties where the connections were all done with the corridor system. So the child was moving along the given program, the given algorithm many times, and in the end he would leave the school to be able to work and to be a citizen of a society. You can see a school and you can see a factory, and they look similarly. The system, the organizational system is very... So this is isolated from the outside, this is closed off organization, and starting from the end of the 80s, post-industrial society came, and this model is changing in the world, and the school is being reconstructed, rebuilt, the same as the retail centers or transport hubs, sports or science research clusters. It is being built as the center for something in the city. So in the same space, what you have in parallel use of one space would have several functions, of course, and as a result of our study we call this school city. And at this slide, on this slide, you can see differences, the key differences between the school city and the school plant. This is a space use paradigm is totally different, as I said. In the city, school city, this is the polyfunctional use of the premises. Also, what's very important here that there is a heart of the school. This is a central concourse, probably a public area where the key important things happen for the school, for the whole, for the entire organization. This is the central event place and active public life of this school. Or in the school factory, this was the director's office, which the director decided everything, and then everybody implemented the decision. So the openness of the school, of the city type school, it is open to the city. Is very important here that the school is turned into not just an educational establishment but a center for the local community of sorts, and people, local residents, they come there to do sports or maybe play music, maybe eat in the canteen with their children, maybe communicate talk to other parents. We went to Finland, we looked at many schools. They are not called schools, they're called community center.
В Финляндии во многих местах объект.
So the school is a local center of culture first and foremost, and only then after that it is an educational establishment. And of course there is the flexibility, mobile here. We're here in this hall, there are mobile partitions here. If you look at the back, you will see that it can be used much more effectively. Where we are now is mobile, partitions, then it would be more economical. The better lighting, of course, is something to note. And the next aspect of the school city is public areas. There are no functionally empty corridors and recreational areas. So every public area has a meaning. It has a function. It may be recreational, might be leisure, or might be educational, and most importantly, the second most important aspect here of all this idea, gradually the city school is reoriented. It reorients from class and lessons to the individual lesson plan curriculum. And now I wanted to show you the heart of the school. In a school of city type, we have different areas like the assembly hall, education, library here, and here what we have is a school in Denmark where there is this central focus. There is a central public area where locals come, and then it's library, and also they have festivities there in that area, and also there is an amphitheater that you can organize. And on the left at this photograph you can see the square in Venice, where you can just see this public area where people come and do what they do, whatever they do. They come up with their own agenda, and they have really nice conditions to come there. So from class and lesson plans, this is a school in Singapore, and that is individual lesson plan type school. And here again they have the areas where children would be comfortable, and for them for talking, and they could do the project work, so to be stimulating for them to come to school and spend time there. Here you can see this is very systemically well organized area where the individuality of a child is not pushed into a certain framework, and you know, it is not the classroom system where you can just sit at one desk and you can't move, etc. Here, there are no meaningless spaces there ever. Like in Europe, we can see schools where there is not just a library or a canteen or a cafe there, but they do come up with new activity formats. For instance, this is a climbing wall, and in one Scottish school we saw the trampoline there. And in recreation our schools is also what's the great shame here. When the project is designed, the standards make us to have these 2 square meters per child, these recreational areas, and the average construction one is $2,000 per each square meter of a school building. So the question is, why do we spend the money on building and on maintaining where it doesn't actually give the child the opportunity to do anything rather than just run and have fights? So this is new area, a new school in Los Angeles. This is also a local community center, and all the architecture speaks that it's open for outsiders. It attracts with its exterior, it invites people in, and you can see for the comparison typical Russian school on the left. It's fenced off because there are rules and regulations that force us to have them fenced off. And the second part of my keynote, this is Russian norms for school construction of schools. On the left it's 10 square meters. This is Moscow. This is the minimal area for a person to live in. If a child has less than 10 square meters, then the Moscow government has to help that child to improve housing. In St. Petersburg and in the region it's probably even less. And 17 square meters, the square, the blue square, this is the average area of a school building per child in new schools. And according to our standards, a child spends 37 hours a week in the school. Is only 20% of his time, of his life. And the issue here is, the question is disbalanced, the private and the public life of a child, and how much room is allocated for that child. So why would he have, for 20% of his time, why would he have so much room, taking into account the fact that our schools are built really, really cheaply and look, well, recently, of course, the recent school buildings are a bit better, but they could still be even better. But how did it happen? This graph shows the tendencies of regulations here. There's 2 square meters in 35 per child. Now it's 17 square meters, and just the last slide now. The key idea of my presentation, our standards, the calculation of the area of premises is per number of classes. This is how it's calculated, but there is another way. The index of effectiveness of use, which is used often by the architects when they design public use areas. This is how this space is used in time. And the standard Russian school, 4,000 kids, how it's used according to the state standards. This 0.8, this is optimal use of the area, when you can actually have the schedule, a lesson plan, schedule where the rooms are not wasted, so you don't waste your maintenance budget. So one, it's totally full, and you can see here that gyms are do not work very well, lab-based classes neither, because standards change really much faster than the construction standards, building standards. And this is one of the key problems of Russian reality, because the education does not fit into those schools which are being constructed, being built in accordance to the standards that exist already. And the aspect of the effective use is not taken into account either. So maybe they should join the class, the arts class, and have both music and drawing there, where you have a large room where simultaneously kids could do both activities. And I saw it in Denmark, or in Finland I saw. And we need to fundamentally review the Russian rules and regulations for construction, because the curricula have to correspond, have to be harmonized with the room allocated and the premises allocated for that, because all of this is to do with the money. The construction of 1 square meter of school building is $2,000 per square meter, and now in the Ministry of Education, even the maintenance is really high cost there, and the ministry say that we need 6,000 new schools in Russia, and the Ministry of Education, we told him all this story, and we were thinking about what we're going to do next with this. And so this is the issue of the money that our taxpayers pay in this budget, and how it can be used effectively. And this is it. Thank you very much, Rosalia. Thank you. And again, probably, well, really, that is a very serious issue, and in my practical activity, I saw that our education authorities, they don't know how the education what it would look like even in the nearest future. So with this, I probably 1.5 questions. So how do we provide for the flexibility of planning? Because even today we understand that our schools are not the way we want them, and in 10 years' time they will even be, there would be new demands, new requirements, new tendencies. Maybe again it will be the education will be not even online, but house education, home education. A number of children do not go to school, they're educated at home. So this is not just a split percentage, just 5, it's several percent whole units. And how do we provide for the design of these schools? How can we plan? Can we actually change the standards, rules and regulations? So the old regulations are bad, we're going to write a new one and everything will be good then? And that would be correct? No, I think that would be a wrong thing to do, because the picture, you cannot actually write one unified standard. So these schools, they, yeah, Alexander, thank you very much. You've asked me very many questions, so very short answer, please. Well, there is a separate story. The trends of development of our education and lesson plans, and the conclusion that we came to, the main vectors are, the key vectors are, this is individualization of educational process, and this is happening in Russian schools when in high schools there are individual lesson plans, they need separate rooms, smaller in size, so it has to be reorganized and it has to be different. Second aspect is altogether the development using space not only in school but in other communal areas. This is a flexibility. This is like this mobile partition, and in European schools these partitions are used a lot. And also, you know the story when the gym could also be the assembly hall where you can have the seats there, and again the gym has the stage which can be folded out, and also there are the bleachers, the amphitheater that you can pull out the seats there, or you can move the chairs which are stackable and kept somewhere nearby. So then the room will be used most efficiently. And then there is also the room for storage, but it's very high quality finish, and the cost of building a building like that is much higher than what we spend building now. It's about $4,000 per square meters, but children, they feel differently in these schools. There's very low level of vandalism because they come to the school, they feel good, it's beautiful, it's pretty, it's great there, they're comfortable there, they feel like at home. So the attitude to this space is totally different as well. And other tendencies here, other trends, this is computerization, ITification of education process. Children will go with iPads, individual computers, tablets, whatever, and it will have to be totally reviewed. The educational process will be reviewed in accordance to that. And also what's very important is deindustrialization of school space. So the school factory that was churning out, this was a conveyor of churning out workers for the factories. So this was the conveyor education. The system of school bell, which was actually taken from the factories. It was like the horn, factory horn, so they remember the discipline for the work. In Europe it's very active. There is this process where all these points are being abandoned, with being excluded from practices, and school has to who live in post-industrial world and find their own place in this world. So like Strelka training the students, like, yeah, whoever we train, we get, and now we're in a state of transition. It's very important also here is the diversification, diversifying the society. For example, the school factory, it comes to, is just not following, and he's got bad marks, and he will have bad marks, and he will be a loser all his life. In European schools, then they have a very great broad range of different societies. There's different extracurricular activities, basketball, whatever, and they could actually. So I'm so sorry, I have to interrupt here, and we can talk about schools a lot, and we can, yes, it is a totally separate topic, is a different subject for this topic. Well, thank you very much anyway, and now we can talk with experts on different aspects of what it is that we lack in, or what is lacking for the cities country. This is Viktor Kisilev, the Minister of Construction of the Sverdlovsk Oblast, and I want to ask him about the city of Ekaterinburg, which is de facto, and according to statistics, is a very attractive city for people because the population is growing. and about the other cities also who need to compete with Yekaterinburg. So, what would these little towns, more industrial, how can they become attractive for residents?
This is a difficult question, of course, how a city how a city can become attractive. Well, because there are no uniform standards. We cannot get a formula, as this has been said before when we were talking about public spaces, because every city is unique, it has its specifics, and every city has its point of economic growth, and the city can become attractive only when this economic point of growth is stable. In this case, well, there is work and there's a means for the city to develop. So there are budgetary means, and there are, well, the population has those means, because mostly the population flows, well, after the 90s, the people started living small towns to go to big cities, simply because the mainstays, the factories closed down, and people had to leave in search for better life. So the attractiveness is not public spaces, as you say, it's not housing, it's good job. Is that what you say? Well, public space plays its role, there's no doubt, because if we look at our cities, they are nice in a way, they are beautiful in a way, because and the nature of the Urals is attractive. We have wonderful places of nature, and the cities, living in smaller cities is much more comfortable from the point of view of ecology, rather than in Ekaterinburg. Yeah, I would agree with you here, and it's true not only for Ekaterinburg. Well, I'm talking about the Sverdlovsk Oblast, speaking about transport. Well, we're accessible, there's no problem getting to Ekaterinburg at any time, and if you want to go to a theater or elsewhere, there's no problem. Thank you very much. Vladimir Veniaminov, Chief Architect of the Oblast. I have a question to you as to the Chief Architect. I'll give the Moscow Oblast as an example. Today, the Moscow the attention to the architecture, city architecture, increased, and they launched a program, architectural face of the city, and this year there will be a construction exhibition where they will give, they started an architectural award from the governor. So speaking of the Sverdlovsk Oblast, the questions of architecture, are they important for the citizens, and to what extent do the citizens value architecture, and to what extent do you try to influence that? Formally or informally? Well, it's a long question, and the answer will be even longer, I guess. I'll try to answer that, and there are several ways to answer. First, I'll say that we don't have the program like in Moscow. I mean, the program which would bring together the architecture of the cities. Probably we have not reached that stage yet, but I think it's still to come. But I'll start by saying something else. Our today's conference is about urbanization, and I will try to formulate the key problem of, well, a lack of understanding by professionals who are dealing with architecture and construction, and the socium, the people who are using the architecture in their real life. Although I do not want to go too far into philosophy, but there's a number of aspects which raise concerns. I mean, professionals do whatever they can to provide a comfortable environment from the point of view of design solutions, and the citizens, they do not understand it. What is it done for? Why is it done? Why is it done this way, not the other? So there's a gap between the practice in the professional community and the practice of open society, which is being formed, though slowly. Speaking about professional community, well, it deals with a problem of their own, and it's clear we can discuss the drawbacks in the federal laws which regulate our activity. However, well, we can discuss legal issues, but I guess the question you've asked is not about it. But the results of those laws is that municipal architects, they are separated from each other. So there is no interconnection. Every architect in the municipality, if he continues working as a chief architect, and how many architects who are architects by training, chief architects who are architects by training? Well, it's quite a big number, although there are examples when a chief architect is not an architect by training. And the situation here is not about so much education, it's about administration, management, because most of these chief architects, these are people who have been there for a long time already, and they have no point leaving. That position is quite convenient for them to work there, and they're doing a good job actually. But those chief architects who've been working for a long time, and they decide to leave, then there's a problem finding who will replace them. We have a potential because we have an architectural academy training the staff, but the municipalities, they don't have this understanding that you need to attract trained specialists to those positions. And the procedure is in this, the problem is in this procedure of replacing the chief architects, because the majority of those who work as chief architects, they are trained architects and they do good job, but thank you. And
let's come back to the subject that was actually declared here, and that's what is it that we're lacking in Russian cities. And Mr. Puchkov, I want to ask the next question. We have the fashionable, trendy sites, for example, today it's parks, are in fashion, kindergartens, and public spaces, public areas. Before Gorky, we had nobody remembered about the parks 5 years ago. We didn't know anything about public spaces before the Gorky Park was done in Moscow. So what do we need? Of course, they need jobs. This is the first thing. What, as well as jobs, what else do they need? And I think that it would be quite right to say that the requirements in terms of comfort, they grow. In Middle Ages they don't know what central sewage system is. Now everybody knows that central sewage system is quite good, and it's the same with many other things. This is just by the by, this is a little aside, and this is the needs pyramid is reflected in a city space. If people, they all have the same needs wherever they live. Would it be somewhere beyond the polar north, or maybe it is Sahara and other deserts in Africa somewhere? There's got to be the city that's got to satisfy certain requirements, and if it does satisfy that, then there will be further needs developed. need, and then the people will be split into different groups, and further more detailed needs will go. The city for a young specialist, for a student, that have different requirements for a city than a pensioner, for example, an old age retired person would ask for, but somewhere they will overlap. For example, that would involve different types of public areas, parks, for instance. And very often it becomes a conflict between different social groups. Some people need to skateboard and other people want peace and quiet. So there's different public spaces for that have to be organized. And now we come to the situation where the city has to be diverse. And rephrasing Tolstoy, paraphrasing Tolstoy, all the unhappy cities, cities where people run away from, they all look alike. They have similar problems. And all happy cities where people want to get to, each one of them is happy in its own way. There is its own selfness, the idea for development, and they become attractive somehow. There is a meaning to their existence, which then snowballs around at different services. They stick around to this core, become specific, become enough for the people. So here we probably need to stop. You can't really say anything better than that. The most important, what you need in town, in a city, you need diversity. And if you the best city would be the city where you have both commercial and state-run kindergarten, and the city where people have enough room, state-run kindergartens, but there is no private one. And thank you very much. That's Oleg Smirnov, and now yesterday we went for an excursion around Екатеринбурg, and a few people asked, can we go to Akademический neighborhood? And I said, no, no time there. So we're talking the city infrastructure, city transportation, and the question is not about transport altogether as on the whole, but about the situation that we have where in legislation and public transport provision, it is something that should be provided by the authorities. And the situation is that the authorities do not actually manage that. They can't do it. So we have the development which is much ahead of the public transport. In Moscow, Oblast is the same, very intensive development, but no transport, lack of transport. So what do you think? Should we break this and actually include maybe developers should start developing, for example, the rapid tram service? Why did it not work? I don't know. Why it was delayed? We don't know. What do you think? If today if the developer say they are going to be the whole set of socially important sites, then maybe they should also make peace with the fact that they have to include the transport provisions for the area that you're developing. So to be a complex developer of an area. And in terms of transport provision, for example, the high-speed tram, well, not everything is done immediately. With time it will happen. Give it time. And if we talk about, if we are talking about who is responsible, the transport infrastructure here, you're absolutely correct. It is municipal and regional authorities, they have to provide that transport infrastructure. Because roads are prerogative of municipal authorities, this is written in the law. And if we talk about the Akademический neighborhood, the Akademический district, then it was quite lucky. Because private-public partnership was based on exactly that. The business would undertake the financing of housing being developed at municipal authority and regional authority together with the federal authorities would support them and provide the social and transport infrastructure. And in this here we could not build this. We did not build the social infrastructure. We did not build kindergartens or schools or anything. Everything is built quite actively in Moscow, and what was formed was the Oblast program was established, the municipal program was established, and there were federal subsidies involved there, and now we have the backbone of roads which were built of a joint effort of municipal, federal and regional authorities. There are 5 kindergartens also built with subsidies from all 2 schools also, but it is not enough. Because the district is very young, not in it's only 5 years of the district, but in these 5 years there's 1 million square meters of housing was commissioned, but not enough. But the people who live there, they're quite young families, so young and middle-aged people, so from 25, 30 mainly, and so it's quite loads and loads of children there, and since there are loads of children, and 2 schools are jam-packed full of their capacity, nominal capacity, 1,850 places there, almost 3,000 kids are in these schools, so two in one place. And I was talking literally today, talking to directors of schools, how they get people in the school, and they say 500 kids come there, and this is 17 classes there, 17 groups, so 7, 8 classes in each school, and it's just this balance, the need and the capacity, this got to be balanced. In 20 years time, let them have enough the clinics and hospitals for those same people. And for us it is very demonstrative that we create comfortable area for young families who actively live in our district, and this is something that we are trying to. Olga Ivanova, please. If you let me, I'll add a little bit to what Oleg said, because
I know the Akademический district from the very beginning, of the project, and that was one of the programs which was endorsed by the Federation. And the construction of the Akademический district started with building a road. So first the road was built, and then the district was built. And I'll answer the question about the interchanges. Initially it was enough. Now it's 1 million square meters. Now we design both interchanges to lead from Akademический, and that is related. And today we discussed it with the Minister of Transport. This is due to not due to the World Cup, Football Cup, but that these 2 interchanges are overloaded, and during the next 3 years we'll complete those interchanges, including the one with the speed tram. And although we say this is for the World Football Cup, but in reality this is the improvement of comfortable living of the population and the territory of Yekaterinburg, which we discussed in the first part. Olga, a question to you about the master plan, and colleagues, we are planners, and today we're talking about, we say a lot of nice words, and we're talking about transformation, public spaces, but unfortunately these words are not included into our laws most often, and the system of our documents does not allow to make a lot of things in the city, to deal with redevelopment, and there is no such notion as public space in the town planning code. meaning the public space as the space for some activity. There's common use territories. So what do you think? How can we create, how can we build something we need? How can we well, change the system of documentation so that it produces what we need and not what it usually produces? If I understand the question correctly, you're talking about two options for municipality and developer designers who work with territory design documents. Either they change the existing system or they generate something of their own without waiting for changes happening to the system at the federal level. Yes, in general, yes, and we need to understand which way to go. I can only give an example of Ekaterinburg. We are not expecting any changes in federal law because we do not always wait for local, so it's hopeless, you say. No, I'm not saying it's hopeless, and it's not quite hopeless, and I found proof of that it's not hopeless in the annual report from the Institute of Urbanistics. They analyzed the possibilities to develop our own forms of documents to design territories, and then those territories could be built into common systems, and theoretically it becomes possible, and also practically it becomes possible. And I can confirm that, well, one of the examples, and all designers are familiar with it, is that according to the town planning code, and what we're missing is the scale of drawings in. We have clear documents on territorial planning, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. We have clear documents on design projects, the scale 1,000, 2,000, and we don't have the scales in between, the intermediary scales. That there's a big need in it, because there's no way we can move from one scale to another immediately. Ekaterinburg, well, the chiefs of architecture, they have refined it, and I can give a lot of examples when of development in implementation and current implementation of such a stage as a concept of development of a town or development of the territory. So the academically we've been talking about, what it implements is the well, it implements the first train of construction, the first stage of construction. There is a project of planning for the territory, and in parallel we are looking at how to connect the second stage of development of the territory, taking into account all changes, taking into account the experience, both positive and negative experiences which have been accumulated during implementation of the planning of the first stage, and based on that, taking into account specific needs and possibilities of investors, taking into account the possibilities of engineering, transport, infrastructure, we will be developing the further stages of planning. I agree. However, as I understand, what you suggest is you do creative work which are needed but which are not included into our law. But there's one question only: to what extent is the budget is prepared to finance those work, or can these works be financed only from off-budget resources? I can give specific examples. On the territory of Ekaterinburg, there are ready-made schemes which are utilizing both options. Today we talked to our colleagues from Moscow, and we discussed that we also have a site, the site next to railway, 300 hectares, and that's comparable to Zeal factory. So this is the concept, and which is sponsored by the city budget. But the concept of developing of the territory near Gornoshitsky Luch, that's 600 hectares, southern part of the city, we used private money, private landowners' money. So both options are possible, and that's good, I think, because as far as I know, in general, well, the budget is quite careful about, well, we had people to make brave decisions. And there are two experts I would like to address to. Alexander Shilkov, head of the project Novo-Srednye Uralsk, and I think he needs a microphone.
And it would be best if you didn't bother too much with the podium and whatever. And the question is very simple. Why did you decide to develop the satellite town, little town? Why do you think that you're going to manage to move intellectual elite, the top managers of companies there? Good, I understand the question. Why not in Yekaterinburg? Why? Yeah, we don't have too much time, so it's a very clear question, and we noticed Srednyouralsk several years ago, and in this municipality we were getting more and more land. They acquiring the land, and there were very simple projects there to start with, and in the implementation of these projects, we have to look at it in a comprehensive manner. As transport is quite close to the center of agglomeration, recreationally is a wonderful lake, the landscape, the countryside is fantastic. Energy, there is the Srednyouralsky heat and electricity station there, so there's unlimited development there. And why did we believe in this project? Because of the projects that we started before we understood that we need to do something with the city. We were quite successful in this housing is sold really well, young people go really well, the same as into Akademический district, and we understand that we need to think about diversifying the economy of this satellite city. So the industrial park, this is actually something that we are carrying upon me. How many jobs are planned there for in the industrial park? How many do you think there will be altogether? How many jobs? If we talk in the industrial park, there's 3,000 jobs. If we talk about the headquarters of our company and all the support, that's about supporting jobs, that's about another 3,000. So our director general and the entire team does believe in all that. We are buying housing there ourselves, and we're moving there, and we do attract quite a lot of. We actually worked quite a lot on studying the situation. We want to establish a new quality of the environment there. We're in very detailed, we are in issues of transport, the public space, the recreational areas, all these things that we're trying to look, not just build now and leave it for 5 years and just forget about it. No, just something that we're going to be living there and probably die then in a good sense. So being happy with the fruit of our labors there. Well, thank you very much. So this is quite an optimistic end to what I wanted to say. So this is quite a real objective, quite a possible to actually, we will be with pride to show, we'll be able to show what kind of new town we've established. But the figures, these are quite real figures. In Moscow Oblast, there are some science towns, 30,000 programmers, for instance, and they do. And the potential, the coders, but the potential, we we do believe that we've assessed it twice, and we're sure that it will work. It's just a matter of time. By 2025, the population will double. This migration, this daily commute to work will be much less than it is now. So I also wanted give the expert that everybody knows, Elena Trubina. I would want her to summarize this session. So would you please summarize what is it that Yekaterinburg is lacking, and what kind of measures should be undertaken? So please. I wanted to come back. The program here that the organizers did not show you the academic neighborhood, and while listening to a very interesting discussion, I was thinking about Mr. Golubetsky, who was talking about, in his point of view, those surveys that were done before this erection, they were adequately implemented in the academический. But what's really overestimated there, those people who are very unhappy, who bought the premises there in the evening, the parking is very difficult, and other things, and there are lots and lots of problems, and very many unhappy property owners there. This is the actual trademark of the interests of decision makers and the residents of the actual dwellers there, the actual residents. So however well it looks on paper, but the live reality of coexistence of people who believed in one of the most ambitious projects of Yekaterinburg, and this is actually very controversial, it turns out. So the infrastructural problems, this is one of the most painful. This is the quality of air, the infrastructure, transport, academically. So far, it's just a cultural desert. There's nothing there. And with what's you're gonna do with all these massive numbers of children there? What are you gonna do with that? The question remains open and urgent. What are you gonna do? We need to see the points of understanding between the authorities and residents and those people who push their own economic interests more successfully than other people. So we need to look and we need to find, and organizers will correct me if I'm wrong. We've got 10 minutes left, so I think that for 2 minutes we need to have some questions from the audience, if there are any. One of the most important things that was mentioned today in the previous sessions and at this round table, the quality of environment. It's got to be filled with something. It's got to be there's got to be a content there. With academический and среднеуральск projects, this is the spread, the thin spread there, from a non-ideal but quite a good quality environment which we have in Yekaterinburg. You take people out of there. It needs to be improved. There is a wonderful project which is curated by Minobr. All the it's got to be the Shartash area, all the educational establishment, all the university have moved there. Well, thank you very much about the schools here. And the first, the actual protective services, the security services is just as important in school, because they have to actually look after the school, same as the those who are overseeing the education. How much does it cost to create the cultural environment in academically? How many years it passed and it hasn't been done? And how much would it cost to create that environment near Shartash and wherever else? And also in Srednyouralsk, what would it cost to establish that? And of course, this is not a question. This is just this is a rhetorical question. There's this conflict between the tendency of the compact city and again, Alexander may answer. This conflict does exist and it has not been resolved. And of course, the environment is formed by the actual residents, and the developer only just does what the people want. And if in that environment you have a certain community, certain society, then it would establish the needs that they need. It's not like the state will build your kindergarten for you. It's got to be an activity. Of course, there's got to be certain things with the help of the state. But if we talk about the cinema or say theaters, whatever, there's only 20,000 people, but 300 places cinema there, but it's not used, it's under conservation, because people are not interested. It's cheaper to go, and nicer to go to Екатеринбурге and to Верхняя Пышма to go to cinema there, but technically it's there and it's in wonderful condition. What we were talking about at the previous session, you've got to be revised, you've got to work on this, and this is a totally huge money which is not comparable with capital investment into construction. So another question over there. They even got their own microphone. Do they? No. The question to Rosalia and Livanov, what did he actually say? Livanov said, he said many general empty rhetoric, and then he said we need to establish a work group that would be doing all this, and then move somewhere. But then in Russia there are several groups which do work on this in the subject matter, and they have to be somehow united, unified. Their efforts have to be pooled and joined. But so far it's just general platitudes, and now he's got to find people that he would be able to work with in Russia. And another thing, one thing I wanted to add is that we actually establish the area, we create the area, but people live it in. But you can still program it, and it's very important for us. It was talked about today that the fact that block by block developments, when we have block, when we have inside the area, then the society develops faster. But cinema for 300, well, do programming there, do it 50. Do maybe several, do multiplex for 60 places each or whatever, and I'm so sorry, and now we are moving to the discussion, and discussion will continue. We continue the discussion during the coffee break. Thank you very much for taking part, and in 15 minutes time we are expecting to see you back here.